other countries that were part of the Commonwealth. Are we better off? Are we not better off? And in many ways, we're clearly better off. We're really fortunate that we have oceans that are moats on both sides. We used to have friendly neighbors to our north and to our south, and that relationship is imperiled. But the continental United States is clearly blessed with the best defensive geographic architecture of any place in the world, and the best inner waterway system for transport of goods, being basically the Mississippi River Basin of any place in the world. Nobody comes close to it. So, are we imperiled? Yeah, the point you raised about Rome is really a good question. Are we do have a jeopardy, as Dr. Francine suggested, a constitutional convention. And she also, I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. And she mentioned Citizens United, which I think is a fundamental, pivotal mistake made by our courts that declared that corporations are people and that money is speech. And I think that perverted some of the concepts in a way that's going to have long-term detriment to the country of equating money with speech and corporations as people, and the ideas of personhood. Yeah, that deserved to evolve, but corporations are not people, and so there needs to be some fundamental reforms. And can it be done outside of a constitutional convention? Yeah, the only way you can do that is by legislation, for practical purposes, or judicial decisions. But the justices are not term limited, and they're going to be in there for life. And we basically know where they stand, at least for the most part. We know where they stand. So outside, and I don't know if the court really can be reformed by legislation. That might require a constitutional amendment or a constitutional convention. And if you have a constitutional convention, one of the outcomes could be that the country would decide to dissolve in part. That's a theoretical possibility. So, what would we be left with? A country on the West Coast, a country in the Midwest, a country on the East Coast.
Country of Texas, it's a republic. The Republic of Texas.
That Lone Star State definitely would want to be, well, not definitely, but likely, would want to self-govern and not have outside interference. So it could change things radically. So I don't think a constitutional convention is likely, but yeah, it could happen. And the decisions that are being made now have weakened the United States from the perspectives of national defense. So our interests are not just, are we in peril? Yeah, we have worldwide interests. We have interests in Guam, in Palau, in along the Pacific Rim, in Europe. We've got bases all over the world, and so part of what makes us strong is the United States dollar being the reserve currency, and one of the main exports that we have is U.S. dollars, and the political power that we have around the world, and that's definitely been weakened with the drastic loss of allies due to our betrayal of our alliances. So, are we in peril? Yeah, we're in peril of real negative consequences from the shift away from the dollar, and that's going to take a long time. It's not going to be fast, but once it starts, like empires, like the Soviet Union was under stress for a long time, and it seemed like it would never end and it would stand forever. So these things happen slowly, and then they happen all of a sudden. So we can be under stresses slowly, and then ultimately the collapse or the disintegration can be all of a sudden. And that's been a historical pattern for empires, and we are an empire throughout history.
So, from my perspective, William, if things break up to where there are multiple republics, I'm going to just fix that little interruption that we're getting. If Clubhouse is commenting, there we go. Then I'm going to declare myself a citizen of the Conch Republic. That's where I'm moving, to the Conch Republic.
Is that down in the Keys? I think that's Key West.
Yes, you are correct. And they did declare their independence.
You have at it. Enjoy.
For one day they declared their independence, I think it was. Thank you, William. We'll go to Barbie, followed by Austin.
Hey, well, I'm 2 hours from the Conch Republic, so, welcome one and all. It's a lot of fun down there. My comment is, I actually do think it's apparel, and I do agree to a degree. It would seem that everything's working as it should be, pendulum swinging back and forth and all of that. If you think there's nothing different, though, than the past 20, 30, 40 years, there is a difference now, and that difference is technology, that difference is AI. And so I would say that if we did not have that factor, then I fully believe, hey, yeah, the pendulum will swing back.
Your microphone's open, but we're not hearing your melodious tones. Barbie, we lost you there. Austin, followed by Yurimo. Austin.
Hi, am I coming in
Hi.
here? It sounds like I don't have the best cell phone reception right now.
We hear you.
Am I in the Matrix or?
No, we hear you loudly and clearly.
Okay, cool. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Anyways, when I only had a minute to talk earlier and I had to run, I was starting to talk about, what kind of country do we want? Are we really working towards a vision? Do we really have visionary leadership? Is hate a temperament of leadership that we want? I think these are really important things to consider. I think it's important to look at social contract theories, like what's the agreement between the consent of the governed and the government? What kind of government do we want to elect? Who are our allies, and are they going to stay our allies? And what purpose does greed serve in our society? Does everyone need more? Do younger generations that can't find jobs, and 10% of workforces at large publicly traded companies are just fired without thought of how they might find a job in the future during a bull market? I think we need, I don't think we need a fundamentalist Great Awakening, but I think it is really faulty to create curse words out of words like liberal and woke, because a lot of people need to wake the heck up and look around and see the world from some other perspectives. I think our nation will endure. I think the Republic will endure. And I hope we find really sage leaders. King Charles, as you mentioned, was highly impressive and highly learned. We needn't not only elect people with upper-class accents and upper-class vocabularies and upper-class cadences, yet at the same time, we want to make sure our leaders are presidential and diplomatic. I think diplomatic's incredibly important. And folks to realize, you could just watch the reality television shows on the television. You don't need to elect a reality television character. to govern us. Like, I think a lot of people have had experiences with bad bosses. Someone I know who's quite conservative mentioned, I'm hiring my politicians. If you get to choose which boss you hire, what type of boss do you want to hire? Because people have compared Donald Trump to that like weird 90s like puppet dinosaur show where he's like the angry dinosaur boss. It's always
right. But this section really is not about Donald Trump specifically, although yes, this use of lawfare is obviously, in my opinion, occurring with the prosecution of James Comey, and I cannot imagine that the government will prevail on this, but who knows? You never know. But the question is, are the abuses that people believe that they see? The Republicans felt that there were abuses by the Democrats when they came after the president during his first term, especially with the impeachments. That was a use of a tool given to the Congress that they felt was being abused because they just didn't like Donald Trump. And now we see Donald Trump using the Justice Department to go after people supposedly, and federal agencies to go after people and their companies because they disagree with him. So that would be an abuse on that side. So my concern that I'm proposing here is that we have this tit for tat going on right now that will likely continue beyond this administration, long after Donald Trump is no longer president. Even if the next president is this fabulous statesperson and not a reality TV star, as you point out, that then when the Democrats are in office, they're going to do the same thing to the Republicans. And then when the Republicans are in office, they're going to do the same thing to the Democrats. And if, in fact, you accept that possible proposition, what effect has that on the stability of the Republic?
What I'm getting at, though, is where I was trying to, we have a pick your own adventure book. We could choose to elect a great statesman, and a great statesman won't be petty. A great statesman will acknowledge the norms that make sense of the past and integrate into a future of increasing AI technology, and will adjust to new systems of leadership. It can't be command and control egotism forever. Like, we're in the 21st century. Let's stop tabooing words like liberal, like we love liberty in this nation, and let's stop tabooing words like woke. Let's wake up and stop liberalism.
So your observation or your argument is that the ship of state will settle on a steady as she goes course once this administration is gone, and we won't see a continuation of the tit for tat that Gary is so concerned about.
Well, I think it's either is possible, but it's a pick your own adventure, and I don't know. I really like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King quote. Like, I'm not quoting this perfectly, but like, the arc towards justice is like a long time horizon, but the curve of the arc bends towards justice.
Thank you for that, Dawson. Yuriyimo, followed by Marcus.
Hey, thanks for inviting me to speak. I just want to read off two quotes that I came across over the years that somehow address this, the prompt of this room. Quote number one is from Cicero. It's from his On Duties, section 11, line 46. That's where he wrote, "It is true that non-citizens are not entitled to the rights of citizens. Legislation to this effect was introduced by those outstanding vice consul Lucius Licinius Crassus and Quintus Mucius Scaevola. But the exclusion of aliens from the city's amenities is completely opposed to natural human relations." Quote number two is from Judge Learned Hand, who's a great American jurist. He made a speech in 1944 during a I Am an American Day parade where he said, "Liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. No constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. While it lies there, it needs no constitution, no law, no court to save it." And I think to answer the question whether the republic is in peril, my 2 cents is that I think, without addressing the geopolitical events, without addressing the specifics in politics, if you compare the energy in this country today to what it was from 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, there was a distinct difference, right? America has been in grave dangers multiple times before. The First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, the national crisis at the beginning of the century, the financial crisis. But I don't think any of these events really took away the vibrant energy in this country. It has always been confident in itself. It always has convictions in its creeds. It was once welcoming of foreigners. It was magnanimous once upon a time. But now a lot of this energy is gone. The fact that people start to hate their neighbors, they hate foreigners without knowing who they are, and the fact that this confidence is slipping away. And I think that rings an alarm bell to most, or at least it should ring an alarm bell to most people of how it got there. I don't have a great solution to it, but just as an observer, I think a lot of things are in peril, including this republic.
Thank you. Your Cicero example is pretty interesting. Obviously, he did not participate in the writing of our Constitution, which notably uses the word people, not citizen, throughout, which has been interpreted consistently by the Supreme Court as to suggest that the protections of the Constitution extend to non-citizens within the United States, especially with regard to the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments, which they ruled specifically on. Thank you for that. We'll go to Marcus, followed by David.
Yes, hello, Gary. So, yes, I agree. We are in the beginning of a severe crisis which affects all multipolar societies, and yes, we are one of them, the biggest. Secondly, the crisis is the evaporation of trust, the ingredients which keep the society together. And we are just at the beginning because AI will accelerate that in a way that buckle up. But
Boy, is that not, you have no idea how right you are. Today, somebody wrote something in the chat, and somebody else thought that it was AI generated, and the person protested, no, those are my words. Now we have to defend what we are saying, because you may not believe that this is Gary saying what he is saying. Maybe I am an avatar. I don't know. Let me look in the mirror. Well, even looking in the mirror, I'm not certain. so I make a little light of it, but holy cow, Marcus, you're absolutely right. After the shooting at the Washington Hilton, circulating online was a picture of the prone suspect wearing an IDF t-shirt. And some people thought he really was wearing an IDF t-shirt, which of course he was not. So you're right. That really, solution. You really hit the nail on the head with that one.
Now comes the solution, Gary. Thank you. So we are the most creative society. And listen to the German immigrant. In 1913, the Congress passed a law to create the Federal Reserve. Why? Because there was a run on banks, there was turmoil in our society. something similar and create a new institution which has a dual mandate like the Federal Reserve. Number one, find ways to increase trust in our society. I have a few ideas how to do that. And secondly, at the same side, it's the same thing as a collateral impact, decrease corruption. As simple as that.
Well, I think that would put more stress on the system, but it might resolve the problems. Supposedly that's what the courts are for, but lately the courts have been ruling, and maybe not lately, based on political ideology sometimes, rather than on strict interpretation of the law. And I know that in the past it was people on the right who were complaining about the liberal justices and judges, and now it's people on the left complaining about the conservative justices and judges, and maybe that's just human nature that occurs. I want to ask you something, Marcus, for my own edification, based on a conversation I had yesterday, which you may have heard with one of your fellow countrymen. Are there First Amendment-like protections in Germany similar to what we have here in the United States?
It's a little different. Every country has its own neuroses, historical damages, and dark sides, so it's crafted differently. But yes, you can also have an opinion and utter it frankly. But obviously, there are certain areas where it's more sensitive.
Gotcha.
Like
So,
in the US,
so I remain confused as to the point that the person was making. I was going to say that it was because
You lust for me?
Didn't have free speech rights, but you say that to one degree or another, they are there. So now I remain confused over yesterday's
it's just
discussion.
a formal thing. Some people would argue we don't have the First Amendment, but that's just, it's a superficial look at it.
Well, obviously you don't have the First Amendment in Germany because the First Amendment specifically is unique to the United States. But you know, you have traffic laws in Germany, which are similar but maybe different in some respects to the United States, but pretty much the same. And so I imagine that this is as well. Thank you, Marcus. We'll go to David, followed by Philip. Howard, are you back? Okay, apparently not. David, followed by Philip.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, David.
Chris, you are a schmuck.
I would say it's changing, it's morphing, it's being rejiggered to diminish democratic processes. The Supreme Court front and center again with regard to more voting rights restrictions. It's interesting that 5 of the 6 justices are white Americans. Only one is African American, who really, if you were to criticize the decision, would be the only one really to say, hey, this may not be a problem anymore.
They're calling for it now. No one wanted this, but woke liberal domestic terrorists.
But the issue is really that the United States has never really been a place that's wanted to share its successes, share its land, share its resources with everybody. A lot of the sharing that's now taking place in this country has been hard won, has been fought by every conceivable disadvantaged immigrant or minority group, even the ones that were here, that were landed on, and had to fight to retain their lands, and had to fight to retain their modicum of dignity and existence in this country. And so it's rather rich that these settlers, these immigrants of settler colonialism, 5 justices who represent the people who came here
Give him
and who enjoyed most of the spoils of this great nation, are now saying, "Hey, it's all fair now. It's all play. It's all in. It's all double. Let's they've had 60 years with this law
What
to
did
get it
they
together,
reply? What
to
the fuck did they
succeed,
call his
and
mom?
to arrive at the same station as all of us. And it's their fault. It's their fault that they haven't done it yet. So let's just get rid of it. Last time I checked, all the corporations and their board members reflect the diversity of this great nation. And so there's a lot of things about this country, Gary, that's being challenged that aren't moving us in a direction of a more perfect union. And again, it can be, without understanding the history, not here, without understanding that there's been an assault on the democratic process ever since the Supreme Court decision decided against abortion rights that was supposedly settled lie by the previous Supreme Court justices. We're seeing a hijacking of the courts where it's easier to control 5 to 6 justices. So I was having this conversation with Scott earlier today about rather than going to every state around the union and trying to lobby every democracy, every Democratic state house or Republican state house to try to get the votes to change these laws, they just go ahead and go after the Supreme Court, get their nominations, throw money behind it, throw money behind the White House, who decides who becomes a Supreme Court justice by dint of their short list, and voila, we have an outcome that has eviscerated the rights of minorities in this country vis-a-vis the Voting Rights Act. So
the king is lucky he didn't got an invite.
Not handed to the people. Hard won, fought, blood. So to make a more perfect union is being dismantled before our very eyes. And we're seeing a president that has been given.
So the question of the room, however, is, will there be a tit for tat when the Democrats are in power? And because look, if your assessment is accurate about this administration, that's fixable once this administration is gone. And to use the terminology that I used earlier, the ship of state is righted. But if in fact the parties are going to continue to go after each other in such a way that they use their offices to disadvantage the other side, if this continues, at least half the country is going to feel disenfranchised, I would imagine, because we're so evenly divided. So does that not portend or allay my fears? Denigration of the Republic?
Well, no, because see, Gary, you don't understand the way that the Electoral College is set up. It advantages these states with a smaller voter population with greater control over the majority. Why is it that California, the 4th, 5th largest economy in the world, only gets 2 U.S. senators to go to Washington, D.C. To protect our rights here? It makes no sense. These are arcane processes that don't reflect the power and the demographic of this union. It's not set up to work properly. So if North and South Dakota senators can block or control, voting or legislative decisions that affect California, then that's not fair. That's not what they designed this for. So this continues, Gary, regardless of the president. This will continue. And so if the Electoral College can't be gained because of the fact that the way it's set up, they get more votes by representation
You're going
when it comes to picking our presidents, then you're gonna continue to have money back candidates like Trump and continue to run the game the way that they've been running it. And this is a result of their loss of democratic abilities to win at the ballot box. Win with ideas, because there's not enough of them that want the homogeneity of this country that this country was founded upon. It's changed. The country is changing before their very eyes, and they don't want that power to slip away either. So it behooves them to put these Supreme Court justices in power and whatnot. And Texas started it with the rejiggering of their boundaries. Now you're going to see 4 or 5 more states take the Supreme Court decision and do the same thing before the 2026 midterms. And it's a further erosion of democratic rights.
Right. So when the Democrats are in power, are they going to erode democratic rights to the benefit of the Democrats and the detriment of the Republicans, or do you think that
they don't have a pattern of doing that, Gary?
That's what you believe, but I think that if the president were here, David, the president would say.
You tell me how you. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I think if the president were here, I'm not advocating this at all, but I'm saying if the president were here, he'd say, David, that the election was stolen from me. The election was stolen. The only way the Democrats could win is by stealing the elections. There are people who believe that. Maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but people believe it.
But see, that's where former president's First Amendment rights have so massive discord in this country. And he's not going to jail for lying. He's not being sanctioned. He's not being fined. He's been allowed to run again. And we rewarded him and allowed him to run again for telling such lies. So what does that say about us, Gary?
Well, now you have to quote Pogo, right? You have to quote the old cartoon character Pogo. I've seen the enemy and he is us.
Well, there you go. So exactly, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a guy that's broken all these norms. This has been, I don't know, maybe you have an idea of how we put the genie back in the bottle, but the polarity of this country is going to continue. I don't know. I think that we're having our own civil war without the guns being drawn on a lot of levels. And I think that that history, we've never had an actual reckoning of the outcome of that civil war. The side that lost has continued to fight and beat back the gains of that war. We've seen that with the 100 years of Jim Crow, the assault on those freedoms of the black citizens that were granted their freedom. We saw it. So my point, Gary, is that so long as this nation doesn't address the underpinnings of the racism in this country, the sexism in this country, the hierarchies and whatnot, we can't check the runaway disruption to our republic in a way that allows us to sit at the table as equals and try to figure out how to run this country without these divisions. I mean, when you eviscerate and you go after minorities through dint of policies saying, hey, you got your job because you're black, white, or female, or LGBT and whatnot, you're telling these people in this country that your merit, your success, your accolades, your hard work doesn't mean anything because we can't trust that you earned it the hard way, right? Whereas our country has a history of rewarding white males for a simple fact that they're white, they voted, and maybe they served in a war or two, maybe they had a college degree or not, but because they were the right color, they had every material advantage that this country's been able to offer. And everybody else had to get in the back of the line of these guys. I mean, your culture as well, Garrett. The Jews in this country had to fight. Nothing was given to them. They had to go to courts. They had to sue. They had to fight. Sometimes, in some cases, they had to create their own industries to find their own wealth in this country, right? Because they weren't allowed in the room. They weren't allowed in the boardrooms. They weren't allowed in the country clubs. We talked a little bit about not letting people into your establishment because you look a certain way. Well, there's a country club here in Los Angeles, Gary, that still doesn't allow blacks, Jews, and other minorities to join. It's called the LA Country Club. And they sit on the largest piece of private real estate outside of probably Central Park, if you were looking at a value of a piece of dirt. And they continue to get away with discrimination. So there are still power structures in this country, Gary, that have all the power in the world to be discriminatory. And they still get away with it. So that's what I'm talking about. That's the apex of this structure in the United States that continues to operate. So I'll end there.
Thank you, David. Howard, are you back? I thought I saw his mic flash. I guess not. Thank you, David. Philip.
I have no idea what the point he just made was. So you said something I kind of want to know about. You think the Supreme Court's more ideological than it's been before?
It's not a question of. Ask the question again. The Supreme Court being ideological?
The Supreme Court is more ideological now than
I think I just said that in the past, Republicans thought that the justices and the judges were pushing liberal ideals as opposed to interpreting the law, and now the liberals feel the same way about the judicial system that the conservatives once did. I don't know if you heard me say.
Yeah, that's what I'm just asking. So when people say this, they need to look at statistics. So since the court has been, this court said, since the new Supreme Court justice was succeeded, there are 9% ideological splits, so 63 splits. They actually have a higher rate right now on unanimous than the court typically has. Let me just pull this up. Their unanimous votes right now are 42%. That's actually a high in the last 50 years. When you actually look at the actual voting blocks of the Supreme Court, it's really not 6-3, it's 3-3-3. And what I find really interesting about some of these things, like the stuff that David was talking about, so on and so forth, is I don't think he understands what the ruling actually was today. And I can understand why some people disagree with the ruling and so on and so forth. That's actually fine to disagree with it, but the ruling isn't based on the idea of whether or not the civil rights laws were in place. The ruling is really based on the idea of if the civil rights laws are truly constitutional. And that's not like a norm. Like, this has been hotly debated since those laws were passed, and the ideas of state rights versus federal rights and so on and so forth. And the idea of like abortion being overturned. Abortion was never settled law. In fact, if abortion was settled law, you wouldn't have seen the actual makeup of the Supreme Court basically rejecting laws by Congress to overturn those. Congress trying to overturn those things and being told that they're unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court basically made up law out of thin air. I mean, RGB basically said this, that the ruling was actually the wrong ruling at the time. Anyways, all of this to basically be said, if you think the country, and I think your general question, if you think our country is in peril, you need to look around the world and see what other places look like. I wouldn't necessarily say our country is the greatest place it's ever been in, but we still have a lot more freedoms than anywhere else that I can think about. And the other thing I think is interesting is I think people think that the president can violate somebody's freedom of speech. I don't know if people actually read the First Amendment. The First Amendment says Congress shall enact no law. It doesn't say the government. It actually doesn't.
It's been broadly interpreted as the government shall not infringe upon your right to free speech. Private industry can, but the government cannot, and that's how it's been broadly interpreted. I believe you know.
Well, the issue is that there's a difference between somebody like the President of the United States using his platform as Deleuze used this to say what he wants to say. He can say whatever he wants to say. He can't violate anybody's free speech rights by making threats or doing anything else like that. It's a lot different than a law being passed to violate it. And when we talk about this, it actually matters.
Nobody has said that he doesn't have the right. He's got his huge bully pulpit called Truth Social, as well as other bully pulpits at his immediate disposal, and nobody has argued that he lacks the right to advocate, for example, for the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. If it was my wife that they were making such a comment to, I might advocate for the person's firing. That's his prerogative to do so. That's not the issue at hand. The issue at hand is whether this government, previous government, and future governments are misusing the tools given to them. Not the First Amendment, but
using the executive branch to enforce laws and regulations to go after political adversaries. And I don't know if you read what is posted. I don't know whether you read what is posted to the top that I wrote to set up today's discussion. But what I'm suggesting is that if we continue on this trajectory of no matter who's in power getting back at the other side, because the other side got back at us when they were in power, it undermines the public's trust in government, and that potentially puts the republic at peril. I am not pointing fingers. I am not pointing fingers, and I state
broad points. I agree with you.
right. I am not pointing fingers, as I have stated several times in the article above and several times on the stage, at one side or the other, just like I suggested before, when the kids are fighting and you only see one kid hitting the other and they say, but Johnny hit me first, it doesn't really matter. So if this is going to continue, would you agree, or would you have the same concerns that I have, that it puts the republic at peril, or can you allay my concerns? That's what I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think at the end of the day, we're too far down the road at this point. I think there has to be some kind of breaking point to bring the country back to the middle. I was talking about this earlier today. You're not going to get the country back in the middle if we continue to have these litmus tests on politicians that have to believe something because they're a Democrat or have to believe something because they're Republicans. And at the end of the day, I mean, we know we're going to have red states and blue states, and we're going to have very, very, very few people in the middle at this point that can actually agree to vote across party lines if they don't agree with some litmus test. Most Democrats now, I should say all because I don't think that's true, but a lot of Democrats right now wouldn't vote for a Democrat that was pro-life, and most Republicans wouldn't vote for a Republican if they were anti-Second Amendment. And the reality is both of those stances, historically speaking, we've had a lot of people on both sides that have actually held different views. But these days, I can't think of any politicians that cross party lines on any one of those subjects. I'm sure there's a couple out there, but for the most part, it's basically a litmus test. And as long as we stay in this idea that the other, like David was basically saying, like the other side is evil, and they're the ones, breaking all the norms and so on and so forth. Like, I'll freely admit that there is no difference between Trump and Joe Biden when it comes to breaking norms, or Obama, Joe Biden, and Trump. I'm sorry, I just don't think there is, and I think you're going to keep seeing this game of what you're talking about. Maybe you think there's hope in the sense of these things, but I tend to think at this point we're way too far down the road, and it doesn't look like we're going to see adults at the kitchen table. It very much seems like brothers and sisters are going to hit each other, and it just depends on whose side you're on.
Thank you, Philip. I want to challenge something that you said, and I hope I'm not taking the wind out of Ben's sail, but as you were talking, I went to the SCOTUS blog, which is
great.
A pretty good source, although the owner of the SCOTUS blog is an irreputable individual any longer, but at any rate,
mine is the head of the man, and my inside is keen as the ox. By my leg I invoke thee. I am the only begotten child of my father and mother. My father is dead. My mother bore me with labor and pain and fear. By my body I invoke thee. About white and pure. Come by the brightness I invoke thee. Mine is the red triangle, reverse the sign. Given of none, save it thee, O Lord. By the Lamed I invoke thee. Mine is the garment of white, sewn with gold, the flashing of day that I wear. By my robe I invoke thee. Mine is the sign of a prophet and Typhoon.
What's the point? What's the point? Hello?
Mine is the turban of white and gold, and mine the blue figure of the intermediate. By my crown I invoke thee. My fingers tremble on the beads of earth, so run
Do you consider AOC to be a psychopath? AOC, is she low IQ? Is she retarded? Is there any hope for America and her leaders in mentally low IQ, retarded, liars, frauds, and content? What's the point? Hello?
Strike the master chord, draw the flaming sword, child and conquering Lord, Horus Avenger. In my hand is thy sword of revenge, let it strike thy cheek. By the sword I invoke thee. Voice of the fire, the voice of the 611 are the voices.
What's the point? Would you consider AOC to be a psychopath? Is she low IQ? Is she retarded? Is there any hope for America when her leaders are mentally ill, low IQ, or retarded, liars, frauds, and incompetent? What's the point? Hello? You're gonna let criminals, propaganda, and the telephone lie.
Mine is the head of the man, and my insight is keen as the hawks. By my head I invoked it. I am the only begotten child of my father and mother. My father is dead, my mother for me with labor and pain and fear. By my body I invoke thee. Of me shine the diamonds are radiance, white and pure. By their brightness I invoke thee. Mine is the red triangle, reverse the sign given of none. Save it be of thee, O Lord. By the Lamb I invoke thee. Free mine is the garment of white, sewn with gold. The flashing of eye that I wear. By my robe I invoke thee. Mine is the sign of a prophet and typhon. By the sign I invoke thee. For mine is the turban of white and gold, and mine is intimidated by my crown I invoke thee.
Hello, Loomer.
My fingers travel on the beads of pearl, so
He's gonna rush.
In my hand is my sword of revenge. Let it strike at my vision. By the sword I invoke thee. The voice of the fight, the voice of the 611 of the voices. Every heart of blood.
I can put the swimming people into a rush. Many Democrats.
Mind is the head of the
Bill
man, and my
Gates.
insight is keen as the heart. By my
Bill
head I
Clinton.
invoke thee. I am the only begotten child of my father and mother. My father is dead. My mother bore me with labor and pain and fear.
The Epstein
By my
files.
body I invoke thee. Among me shine the diamonds of radiance, white and pure. By the brightness I invoke thee. Mine is the red triangle reverse, the sign given of none. Save it be, oh be, oh Lord. By the Lamb and I invoke thee. Mine is the garment of white soul with gold. The flashing of light that I wear. By my robe I invoke thee. Mine is the sign of Apophis and Typhon. By the sign I invoke thee. Mine is the garment of white and gold. And mine the blue vigor at the intimate ear. By my crown I invoke thee. My fingers travel on the beats of pearls, so run I after thee in thy car of glory. By my fingers I invoke thee. For thou the one
Second
who
Amendment.
power in the voice of the Master. Abraham, by the word I invoke thee. Hey, mine heart did not know waves of music in the song that I made of all to invoke thee. Strike the monster chord.
Look, how close were Jeffrey and Peter? Did they have sex? Did Peter suck Jeff's cone-shaped dick? What did the Epstein files say about Peter Thiel? Oh, fuck. Adrian Dittman. Wait, who are you gonna arrest this week? I can think of many Democrats that need to be arrested as soon as possible. Bill Gates and Bill Clinton are the entirety of the Epstein files. Oh my god, what? Like, how close were Jeffrey and Peter? Did they have sex? Did Peter suck Jeff's cone-shaped dick? What did Epstein files say about Peter Thiel? Oh, fuck. What a rumor. Incompetent. How close were Jeffrey and Peter? Peter sucked Jeff.
Mine is the head of the man, and my insight is keen as the ox. By my head I invoke thee. I am the only begotten child of my father and mother. My father is dead. My mother bore me with labor and pain and fear by my body.
Oh my god, he was on IG.
Shine the diamonds of radiance, white and pure by the brightness.
Oh my god, he was on IG asking for money.
Is the red triangle reverse the sign? Even of none say they be of thee. Oh Lord, by the layman, I invoke thee. Mine is the garment of what sown. Mine is the head of the man, and my insight is keen as the ox. By my head I invoke thee. I am the only begotten child of my father and mother. My father is dead. My mother bore me with labor and pain and fear by my body. I invoke thee. About me shine the diamonds of radiance, white and pure. By their brightness, I Mine is the head of the remaining in the sign. The invocation concludes. Therefore I say unto thee, come thou forth and dwell in me, so that every spirit, whether of the firmament, or of the ether, or of the earth, or under the earth, on dry land, or in the ether, of whirling air, or of rushing fire, and every
How
spell
close
and
was that?
scourge of God, the vast
Release
one might
Epstein
be.
files.
Mine is the head of the hawk,
That
I
we
bear the rose and
can let our lawmakers know, like, this has got to stop. This has got to change. Like, when is enough enough? I think I saw Shannon from Awake Illinois post. Sorry, I was getting a phone call. She made a post like, how many more dead bodies do we need? How many more dead children? How many more dead husbands? Like, enough. So thank you, Chief, for coming and speaking with us. If you want to start with like a brief intro, most of us know who you are, but I would love for you to talk about
your background and then the initiatives that you have with Awake Illinois and the newest announcement with Bob Fioretti.
Yeah, good evening. Everyone hear me good?
We can.
All right, good evening. Yeah, my name is Tom Weitzel. I'm a retired police chief from Riverside, Illinois. That's a small community west of the city of Chicago, about 9,000 residents. I was there for 37 years. Worked for another suburban community before that. Worked about 40 years in law enforcement. And then I did 13 years state police. And when I hired,
Chief,
yes.
can I interrupt you? You sound a little muddy. It's almost like you're far away from the microphone.
Is this any better?
Oh, it's so much better. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's great. So I was looking to keep active in law enforcement. So, and I also wanted to speak up for law enforcement because a lot of chiefs and to a lesser extent sheriffs are reluctant to speak their mind and really advocate for policing because, police chiefs owe their job to their political structure. And I was tired of that. I didn't work for that type of community. My community, my village president and board of trustees were always public safety supporters. They never tried to muffle me for my thoughts on certain issues, especially legislation. So I was fortunate. But I was offered this position with Awake Illinois, and Shannon offered me a position as their first ever fellow of law enforcement at Awake Illinois, and I was honored to accept that. So I've been working with their organization to push pro-police legislation, review legislation, initiatives for law enforcement, and really outreach to other police and sheriff's agencies as well to let them know what we're about and how we could assist in the criminal justice form. And then I recently was appointed the chairperson of the Accountability and Safety Committee that is going to be, it's actually up and running already for Illinois Attorney General candidate Bob Fioretti. I've supported Bob. He's the only candidate I've ever supported. I supported him for state's attorney. And he asked me to chair this statewide committee so that we could present on behalf of the committee to the governor and the leadership in Springfield changes that are needed, not only for the Safety Act, but public safety in general. So we're going to be, that just got started last week, so we're going to be seeking advice, suggestions, and even committee members from Illinois residents, both in the Metro Chicago area, Central Illinois, and Southern Illinois. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. And when I saw a post that said you guys were seeking volunteers, can you tell us a little bit more about what you are looking for residents if they're interested in joining that community or that committee?
Yeah, there's a link on Bob Fioretti's website. You can go and fill out a form. It will go directly to him and me, or his staff and me directly. You can just ask questions. You could make suggestions. Or you could join our committee because Bob is clear. He wants this to be not just the police. He wants to get citizens involved, judiciary involved. He's reached out to both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican. We have not had any Democrats that have expressed interest, but he has made the outreach for that because it's just a committee to make suggestions. We're not going along any party lines here. We're going to make common sense suggestions for changes to the public safety arena in Illinois and the Safety Act. He's also reached out to court personnel because they're the ones that have to deal with this. So we're looking for circuit court clerks who administer many of these technical parts of the law, and anyone that would really want to make suggestions and be heard. And Bob is planning on doing statewide listening meetings. We're going to do one in the Metro Chicago area. We're planning on Central Illinois, Southern Illinois, so that we can get the full state and we don't make this just a Metro Chicago issue.
That's great. So Bob is running for Attorney General against Kwame Raoul, and when we have our upcoming elections, let's say Bob wins, but Pritzker wins, and we still have a largely Democratic legislature. This is going to be an uphill battle, even if we have Bob on the inside. Are there contingency plans for that?
Yeah, Bob has plans for that. Yeah, you're right. It'd be an uphill. You're absolutely correct. There's no hiding that. But he has a good working relationship with both sides of the aisle. He has disagreements for sure, but he's a seasoned trial attorney. He's been, he was a Chicago alderman. You may know his history. He plans on addressing it head on if, in fact, the governor was to be reelected and, in fact, Bob was to be elected our next Illinois Attorney General. But, one important distinction of the current Attorney General and what Bob Ferretti would do, under the statutes in Illinois, the Attorney General is the single highest law enforcement officer in the state of Illinois. So, that individual should be advocating for police, for law enforcement, for common sense public safety issues, and that's not happening right now. It isn't happening. So, Bob will definitely work on the Safety Act and public safety and legislation that affects Illinois residents, besides working on legislation that brings national attention to the Attorney General's office, but does nothing for citizens, does nothing for Illinois residents. So he's committed to working for the residents, and I'm helping him on the public safety arena. That's going to be my position.
I really appreciate, it looks like you've been making the media rounds, especially with this latest case, and that is so important to get all the eyes on Illinois and how this has been a colossal safety failure for the entire state. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Given everything that you know and the committee position that I see John is on here too, that you and John are working with this committee, what can we do as Illinois conservative grassroots members do to help and raise the groundswell of attention? I feel as a Chicago resident, I'm scared to leave my house after 8. And the city is no longer safe. I am aghast at what I see on the streets, and I live in a quote unquote good neighborhood. And I've had it. I'm so frustrated, and nobody is supporting our first responders who are representing us statewide, and it's disgusting to me. So I what can we do? I'm just asking personally for me, and we'll open it up to anyone who wants to come up and talk with the chief. Please raise your hand and we'll bring you up.
Yeah, I can give you my perspective on it. It definitely starts with getting informed. There's no question about that. Our residents in Illinois here need to be informed. That's where it starts. And then you need to show up. There's no question about that. And what I mean by that is individuals need to not only show up at Springfield, but they need to show up at their city council meetings, their county board meetings, and advocating even at their own elected officials level. So your mayor, your city, village attorneys, your village presidents, without a doubt. And then everything flows from Springfield. And what I mean by that is, we have to enforce the laws. We have to follow the laws, even the ones we don't like. The police and the judicial, we're not able to pick and choose. Whatever they give us, we have to enforce. So the legislation coming out of Springfield is very important. That's why it's important on who is elected and who gets, who is in office and who's controlling the legislation coming out of Springfield, because there's plenty of pieces of legislation that I never agreed with as the patrolman all the way up to chief. But I can't pick and choose that. I have to enforce and follow the guidelines of the Illinois statutes. So that's where change has to start, and then it works its way down through the court system, and it works its way down through prosecutors, defense counsels, into law enforcement. So the really way to get informed is to really be informed for sure. And then, lobby our legislators or appear or call them or letter writing campaigns, because I'll tell you what, grassroots counts. When I was on the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police Legislative Committee for 13 years. And I was lobbying in Springfield all the time. And I would go to these subcommittee hearings where I would testify on behalf of the Chiefs Association or the West Suburban Chiefs Association, where I was president. And they would always say at some point during my testimony, they would ask the clerks or the court officers to read how many witness slips were for or against the issue that I was speaking on. It happened every time. And when there was like 10 or 11 witness slips, they didn't care. When I testified in front of boards in Springfield for legislation where they'd had 500 witness slips supporting a piece of legislation that the Chiefs Association was supporting. And I'll tell you what, the legislators took that seriously. So those little things do make a difference. So people think that, I can't make a difference, or making a phone call or calling their office or writing a letter to them makes a difference. It does. They pay attention to that.
I have another question. So there are still a lot of unanswered questions about what happened with the two officers and the offender at Swedish. We know that it has not come out publicly how he got the gun. We know that he was swiped with a wand at the hospital, I think by the hospital, I think Swedish put out a statement that said they did not discover a weapon on him at that time. But my really big question is, aside from that, is this guy's criminal record has come out. I believe he's been arrested many times. He's been charged with many felonies. I think you maybe even mentioned this recently on one of your interviews on Newsmax, but the officers' hands are tied. The criminals now know they can basically say, claim a medical emergency, and that's your best chance to get out and escape. But why? What specifically, in your opinion and your knowledge, was this guy out? Was it because of the Safety Act? Was it because of discretion of a judge interpreting the Safety Act? Was it a failure of the electronic monitoring program? Why specifically was this guy out and allowed to?
Murder of this officer and the shooting of his partner was 100% preventable. The judge in the case, Judge Likes, he could have held the defendant. There's no question about that. He had been the judge on previous cases of this defendant, and he even stated that Mr. Talley, in prior cases, that his brain was not fully developed and that he had some issues that would mitigate him being held in custody. And I want you to know that was 8 months before this incident on Saturday where the officer was killed and his partner shot. Now, that's crazy. The defendant is 26 years old. This judge is not a neurosurgeon. He didn't seek a doctor's advice for that. He just said that in open court. So to make that type of statement is extremely prejudicial in my opinion. And he had some connection to this defendant. And I don't mean personal. I don't mean he knows him personally, but he was using this individual as like a test case, in my opinion, for the Safety Act. He was following it for sure. And he gave the defendant every possible break that he could. Because to meet some of those Safety Act requirements to be held in custody, it's a pretty high bar. But this defendant he meant that. At the time of the shooting in Chicago and the murder, he was actively wanted on 2 outstanding warrants, was listed as an absconder from the Illinois Department of Corrections, which means that he was not following the provisions that were put into his release. And they had a parole, or basically what they call an IDOC warrant. And he still was out roaming the streets. His EM, his electronic monitoring ankle, was not working. It's reported that battery died and he didn't charge it, so he could have cared less about that. And yeah, there was some criticism that, I'll stay away. There's no criticism on the Chicago police for what happened. You have an individual who's 340 pounds initially. He lost about 60 to 70 pounds in the last couple of months. He was down to like 270 when they brought him to the ER in Swedish. And you can hide a gun, the one that he had, smaller Glock, you can hide that pretty good. Now, he was wanted. The hospital made that statement. He was wanted. But depending on the amount of layers of skin protecting that weapon, what kind of weapon it was made of, most of those are alloy, they're not actually metal. Those detectors are still designed to go off when you wand a weapon such as a Glock. But he got it in, and then the circumstances were tragic and heartbreaking. And, I'm extremely angry at this because I've been fighting the Safety Act since its inception. And in the 5 years it's been long, there's never once been a time that any of the legislators that supported it or the governor said they would look at changes. You may have remembered after the law was passed, there were 2 trailer bills that were passed, and they did nothing. They were technical cleanups. What the Illinois Chiefs Association wanted was not addressed. It never has been addressed. So that's why I thought to myself, I've been really complaining about this legislation and slamming it for years. And then when I got involved with the Wake, Illinois, I was like, what can I do? What can I do concrete to make a difference? So that's why we put together our report, so we can give them common sense initiatives to change the legislation and not just say that we're complaining with no solutions. We have solutions, and Bob Ferretti's committee is going to have solutions, so they can no longer say that we're just upset with the legislation. We're going to give them solid solutions.
I feel almost like I'm trying hard to figure out how to articulate it, but it's like Pritzker is so proud of this legislation, and the Democrats are so in lockstep with Pritzker that I fear that nobody will step out of line, and we are all going to suffer. But it's clear this cannot continue. Like, we are all in danger. I mean, again, when I mentioned that Shannon had said, how many more kids and husbands have to die? Like, I feel like if this is not the tipping point, we can't go any lower. This is, insane. John, I see you have your hand up if you want to go ahead and ask a question or say something.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, Chief Thomas? Hello?
Yeah, John, I can hear you fine.
Hey, my father was a Chicago police officer for 34 years, and I just couldn't imagine being a kid and my dad not coming home because, some POS, gets no cash bail, and he carries a Glock around in the fat fold of his skin. I mean, it's very upsetting, and, the fact that he's even still alive amazes me. I don't know why he just isn't eliminated on the spot by the police, taken out immediately, because he's not, anyways, my question for you, Officer or Chief Thomas, is, if you were the mayor of Chicago, what would your administration, what would your goals be? What would you do immediately for the security of Chicago? Would you call in more federal resources? Because, obviously our political leaders here aren't leaders, they're criminals. So, I mean, is there a solution that has to come from the outside? What would you do if you were the mayor or the governor? Thank you, Chief Thomas.
Yeah, I don't think they want me as the mayor or the governor, but because they probably wouldn't like my agenda, but I would have a clear agenda that, yes, Chicago police and the state, we would partner with our federal agencies, no question about that. Why would you turn down help from any law enforcement agencies? You know, the Chicago police and other police departments already are on federal task forces. They're just not the ICE task forces. They're on DEA, ATF, FBI. I would definitely do that. And my first priority would be public safety. It wouldn't be planting trees, making the beautification, spending hundreds of millions on beautification. Because you know what? Look at downtown Chicago. The storefronts are empty. People aren't going down there in droves anymore. I got hammered when I did a piece, a column I write called Roll Call for the Suburban Life, and I did a column that said, don't spend your hard-earned money in Chicago until they improve public safety. And I was flooded with emails and stuff saying from Chicago businesses, yes, that's right. But politicians in Chicago or other civic leaders were sending me emails saying, why would you tell people, like especially suburbanites, to stay away from the city of Chicago? And when you're risking your life and you can't walk in the downtown loop area and go to dinner or go to a show or go to a play or visit the museums without fear of being robbed, attacked, or shot, then you shouldn't be spending your money there. That was a comment I made, and I got the most pushback on that column I wrote of any column I've ever written. But it's true. Why should you be spending your money down there when the city doesn't care? So I changed that. I would absolutely hire more officers. Well, you know, you can't, when you say you have to make public safety a priority, you have to do it. You just can't give short sound bites and put out press releases and news releases. You have to do it. I do think one thing the city has done, in my opinion, the only really good department head appointment that the mayor has ever made is the superintendent. I believe the current superintendent is actually a very capable and honorable individual. He's very well respected in the police circles. He was before he was superintendent. He's been there a long time, has a good reputation. So I think that appointment is really good. But it's time for things to change because we just can't keep saying it's politics anymore. We need police leaders to stand up. We need sheriffs to stand up. We need to push back against this and not worry about whether your cushy job is safe anymore. You know, it's your officers that are being shot. It's your officers that are being killed in the line of duty. You have to stop and you have to stand up.
I have a question, if I could chime in, and feel free to tell me where I'm ignorant. I don't mind being wrong. I read, and again, you know, everything you read on the internet is absolute gospel. But I saw out there that there was some relationship or something between the murderer and who is it? A CPD commander. Any knowledge to that?
Yeah, I've seen the same social media posts that there was a female commander, I think she's since retired, I believe, that has the same last name as the offender, and there are some that are linking her to the offender. I have not seen that verified by anyone, so I have not pushed that narrative or seen that narrative. And that commander, by the way, got into some trouble ethically in the city of Chicago. I think that's why she was eventually demoted and then left the department. But yeah, I've seen those same social media posts, but I don't have information that that's factual. The only thing I know is that they have the same last name.
Okay, yeah, that's too broad to go off of to marry them together, in my opinion. I was just curious if you knew. And my biggest thing, I remember when I was younger, you know, you get the friends together, you go out to Chicago, you enjoy it, because Chicago's beautiful. Chicago has a lot to offer. Chicago should be an epicenter for the United States, especially, you know, where we're located, every attraction we have, and yet crime drives people out. I find it disappointing and sad that the most feedback you've ever gotten on any article you've had is when you criticize Chicago in defense of people surviving the visit, opposed to actually addressing the problem, which is my biggest grievance with it. there's so much potential there, and yet it seems to be deliberately squandered. And I say this in a joking level. I don't know at what point they push people until you essentially get some vigilantism that essentially takes over due to the failure of the justice system. You have judges that don't obey the law. You have cops that no longer want to police because it's just a revolving door. And then you have hiring shortages because who wants to sign up for that job? It's detrimental. But I know that was a bit of a rant. I guess my question, if you know, without going through the judiciary, is there any way on a grassroots level that you can somehow get a judge removed? I highly doubt it, but I'm just curious about that, thinking out loud.
It's almost impossible. They have a judiciary advisory board where you can file complaints. It's very secretive. It's one of the most secretive processes. I even filed complaints against judges in my district, the 4th district. Our courthouse was in Maywood, Illinois, and some judges there would publicly berate my officers in court, and they would actually tell the officers that, I don't believe you, you're lying, and the officers would come back and tell me, and I would call the presiding judge of the district and make a complaint, and they would just laugh it off. And I had a judge tell me, this is my courthouse, I do what I want. So I filed a complaint with the Illinois Judiciary Advisory Council, and they sent an investigator out to interview me, and this is the last I ever heard of it. And then when I followed up on it, I asked for the documents. They said I couldn't have them. As a chief, now imagine this, I went to the website and I FOIA'd it, and they said it's not FOIAble. Not only did they not reject, they only didn't reject it, they just said that they had a special clause that information was not publicly available to anyone, and I would not find out the disposition of the investigation. And the only reason I knew nothing happened was because the judge, he was serving in the courtroom when I retired. So that process is extremely difficult to remove a judge from a duly elected judge from his city position. It's very difficult.
I assumed as much, but hey, I always try to push a little bit of optimism, sprinkle a turd every now and then. But it was worth a shot. Going forward, honestly, I think you already answered it. The only way to really make change is not to expect that we're going to change anything overnight and just to bite off what you can chew one piece at a time. Because with these judges, with the heads of state that we're dealing with everything that seemingly works against the people of this state, other than fleeing, all anyone should seemingly focus on is just their neighborhood. Get good people in office there and let it trickle on up.
Yeah, I agree with you about, little bites, because I have been an opponent of the elimination of the Safety Act. Just get rid of it. And early on, I was doing that. I was frustrated, and I realized this isn't working. Like, Springfield's controlled by the Democrats. They're not going to repeal the Safety Act. So then I had to come up with, okay, we're going to have to come up with common sense changes and work. And then some of my counterparts and some of my colleagues, even in law enforcement, they were very disappointed, and they were like, Tom, why are you not advocating to get rid of the entire act? And they were criticizing me, and some even in public, and I'm like, I'm still for that, but I want to get something positive done to affect public safety in Illinois and protect police officers and protect citizens. And if we keep banging our head that we're going to get the law completely annihilated and Springfield's going to get rid of it, nothing will happen. So yes, I'd like to get rid of the Safety Act, but you have to be realistic. If Springfield was controlled by Republicans, it would probably be eliminated. Or we had a Republican governor, maybe it would be eliminated. But that's not going to happen. So when I changed my stance to give these common sense reforms, some staunch law enforcement friends of mine were very upset by that. But you know, I want to accomplish something for public safety and for the residents and the citizens of Illinois. And if I keep going down this path that we're going to change Springfield when it's controlled by the Democrats, that they would get rid of it, I was going to accomplish nothing.
That's absolutely true. And you know, too many people look at the large picture, but they don't actually do anything to get the large picture built. They just want the final piece of the puzzle. They just want the puzzle automatically put together, but they don't want to do it piece by piece. And I believe it was Sheriff Mendrick who also championed the same mindset of we just have to chip away at it little by little, opposed to trying to repeal the whole thing. Kind of like how Republicans unfortunately lose every time they go up against Obamacare. You know, you're not going to dismantle it in one swoop, unfortunately, in my opinion. You have to at least just make the changes that make it less bad. I know that's not a complete win, but at least that less bad might save one additional person in the meantime until the next step makes it less bad the next time, and so on.
Yeah, just getting rid of it is just for headlines. You know, it's just for notoriety. I want to accomplish something, and like you just said, it has to be, we have to chip away at it. So those that criticized me that I wasn't still advocating to eliminate the entire statute, well, for 5 years we haven't been able to get that done. So it's time to take a different approach, and we're going to start chipping away at it.
Do you think Bob might be able to get, I'll say, friends from across the aisle, even though I wouldn't call commies friends, but nonetheless, we'll say people from across the aisle. Do you think he'd be able to get more people to sign on if it wasn't a full-blown repeal of it, like you were talking about? Hey, you don't have to come out and publicly dismantle this or be against the Safety Act, but how about we just do this little revision and it could be called, SB 123 ABC? But but you won't be hit by your party leadership for opposing the Almighty Safety Act. Do you think that might be a good way to get this done, or does it context that you think would be willing to do it if it was shrouded and buried in a bunch of other nonsense like bills unfortunately are created to do?
Yeah, Bob is committed for sure to making changes in the Safety Act, and he is absolutely willing to do that. He does have contacts on both sides of the aisle. He is going to work feverishly to assist us in our committee on this public safety initiatives and Safety Act. And we had several meetings before he even put me on the committee and made me the chairperson, and we're on the same page with that. I think Bob would like to get rid of the act too, but we have to accomplish something besides just people just doing stories on our wanting to get rid of. We have to actually do something to get this. It affects people's lives. It affects the criminal justice system. As I said earlier, the Chicago police officer, in my opinion, would be alive. He'd be alive if the Safety Act was amended to the way I'd like to see it amended. He would not be dead, because that situation would have never happened, because he would have already been in custody. So those are real life situations. And just imagine that family, a police officer's family, one's getting ready to bury their loved one, the other is staying by the bedside every night, hoping that individual will survive, when they know that this could have been prevented. Not only was their loved one shot in the line of duty and killed, they know now that individual should have never been out. So just that heartache is just brutal. And I think that there's a change. I did this 2 press conferences with Bob last week, one in Chicago, and then we traveled out in the afternoon to Springfield at the Rotunda at the Capitol. And I can tell you there's an appetite from citizens, from residents of Illinois who didn't like the fact that the Safety Act played a role in the young woman that was set on fire on the CTA in Chicago, the L. Okay, that individual had 72 prior arrests. He should have never been out of custody. This situation had not occurred yet, but this situation, even the young college student that was killed on Chicago's lakefront. The reason that was preventable is because he should have never been in the country. So there's this appetite for those that don't even want to repeal the Safety Act, but they want to see common sense changes. What I found to be interesting is when we were talking to some legislators, there's no interest by them. Like, there's no interest by Democrats. So there's this interest by the residents and the citizens you serve, but on the Democratic side, there's no interest to modify the Safety Act yet. In fact, you may have seen that the Springfield, the Black Caucus leadership last week came out with a press release and famously said, there's nothing wrong with the Safety Act. They have no intention of repealing it or getting any changes. You can go to their website and you can just Google that. I couldn't believe it. They put out a press release saying